to just be humorous, or to be more humorous than like it's, yeah, I mean, he's, combining the two. So what went wrong, folks? Did something go wrong?
Good now.
All right, okay, yeah. Yeah, so I think we've kind of found an intermediate point, whereas if you go to our event, you will learn things, you'll be intrigued about things that you'll want to pursue more than if it was purely humorous. We have some history, when the current Tuesday night poetry used to be at Rouge Lounge. There was also a humor night. They were always better funded, better attended. Everything was higher status about the humorists as opposed to the poets. And now I would claim that when you look at the actual, educational value of what we're doing, that the poets and musicians will come out on top. Okay, any questions about what I have presented here? My goodness, we have 35 minutes. Yeah. So, all right, and any questions about the course in general? We were really charmed with the quality of your discussion the last time. So I hate to think that was just that I temporarily stepped into an alternative reality that day, and it's never going to happen again. That you guys have really insightful comments, and so lyrical presenting them. So yes.
I guess if transplantation and all that gets, relatively mainstream, inexpensive, quite regular, and however many years it'll take, is that going to be kind of incentive for people to stop taking care of themselves as much? Because it's like, if they're smoking for 30 years, okay, I'll just get a new lung.
So that, you may not have realized it, but that is part of a much more general question of risk-taking because of human insignificance. Right? So what you're talking about is there's a minor possibility that could occur, but you can imagine a future world where the people in charge of the world are much smarter than we are and are not human, and secondly, where our consciousness can be uploaded to like a ceramic slab, right? And so maybe the life on a ceramic slab is way better than a life in a biological body. So you put all those things together, and you have the possibility of a world where you feel insignificant, and you know that you've been recently backed up, and so if you do something that causes your life to end, you can just go back and regenerate yourself from the last copy on the ceramic slab or whatever. So things will change, but your question suggests an area in which they'll just change a little bit. I think the future is actually much more dramatic change than that. Suppose a life on a ceramic slab is really good. I still think most of us are so unfamiliar with how we would function if we were in something other than a biological body that the psychiatric effects of making that transition would be overwhelming, and like you'd need a lot of preparation, right? So it's probably true that once you get to the ceramic slab that you're immortal, and maybe you're joining with all the other consciousnesses in the world, and, all sorts of good stuff, but there would be a tremendous number of things that would cause your well-being to be impacted, right? So I hope that's not too general an answer. Like you're asking a question that might apply in the next 10 years. I'm giving you an answer that might apply in the next 200 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to your points, I think in one of my psychology classes we learned about risk compensation in sports. So they talk about the notion of how, for example, in NHL and in ice hockey, you increase the quality of protective equipment and pads and whatnot. So that leads to more riskier behavior, and you've seen that as a trend throughout time. So I think, yeah, kind of like Dr. Solis was saying, like in the short term, I could probably see that happen because you've seen it in other aspects like sports. But another question I would have, like kind of just to follow up on what you said, are you suggesting that one day in the future we would essentially back ourselves up onto substrates?
Yeah, no, I think that this is at least one idea. Yeah. So it's more complicated than that. Like one of the scenarios that Jonathan White is likely to give you is the idea that your significant other dies, and then like a week later you get a call that unbeknownst to you, she had been backing herself up. And you can get somebody extremely like her based on that backup, but it's maybe only 80–85%, or they can just delete it and forget it ever happened. So what would you do, right? So that's yeah. So it's a very complex question, and like we don't really know. When you think of all the ordinary people who've done evil things in the world, where they're in a scenario where suddenly evil is the thing, like if they're in Nazi Germany or something, we don't really know how much of our behavior is sort of the moment and therefore very hard to capture and like by copying something, and how much is much more permanent than that. To what extent is the personality that you're exhibiting and I am right now something highly dynamic and not very much based on the structure of our brain, and to what extent is it based entirely on the structure and in some sort of deterministic way. You and I pretend that we have free will having this conversation. Actually, what you're going to say, what I'm going to say, was determined a long time ago. It's like that actors on a stage, right? We don't really know. But anyway, yeah. So I'm not saying anything is going to happen. I think the technology for that to happen is likely to be there. Our understanding of the brain and how it functions, sort of reverse engineering the brain, that's what that is. So a lot of people are working on that now. It's what Ray Kurzweil's latest book is about. And so it is a possibility at least worth considering. Yes, Greg?
I would just throw in that when you're contemplating the ethics of the future, it probably is worthwhile to think of a couple different categories like you've applied. One would be the nearer future as new technologies are emerging. Say we're able to replace particular cells or organs one by one, and I think it's worthwhile to ask what's then. And then the more distant future, when we've really mastered these technologies, when the idea of backing up, a human brain and soul are conceivable. But the interesting question, like I suggested the other day, is to what degree do human ethics change? Do interpersonal relationships change? Can we infer that they still remain the same or are fundamentally different? I think the suggestion from history is that not everything is likely to change. Our inclinations, our desire for love and bonding with the other will probably still exist in some way. But I think, to your question of, won't the knowledge that we can replace certain body parts perhaps lead to risky behaviors? I would say absolutely they will. Human beings have proven that, because, and one of the things we have to entertain is that we clearly don't make decisions based on reason alone. Our gut and our whims play a big role, but I'm absolutely certain that if new lungs were easily available, smoking rates would fly upwards for completely understandable reasons.
Yeah, I think one of the skills I would like you to have is to figure out, like, in the other parts of your life, when people start to suggest simplistic views of the future, for you to have a much more nuanced view of what the real possibilities are. I think, your friends in associate school will find that very interesting, and secondly, it has potential survival value in the actual future. You'll be more prepared than anyone else because some of the scenarios that we talk about will actually happen. We don't know which ones. Yeah.
How do you think gene modification will play into regenerative medicine? And like, what if in the future, like humans just get so enhanced that like there's no need to replace any organs at all? Like, do you think that would happen? Or?
Yeah. I mean, we may not need organs, right? I mean, maybe what matters is our thoughts and our ability to think and our ways of approaching problems in the world. And that the other things that make us who we are don't turn out to be valued all much by humans. So that would mean that at some point, main medicine that matters is that medicine to transfer from your biological body to some other inorganic substrate, because that's what everybody's doing, right? And then from that point onward, knowledge of like how to regenerate kidneys and stuff is of historical interest only. Where we're going, we don't need kidneys. Yeah. And you can think about a lot of wild card sort of things that could occur that interrupt the progress of science in such a severe way that the things we're assuming will be possible won't actually be. I mean, they could have if we had kept going as we are, but something happened, and it could be nuclear war, all sorts of things we can think about that just mean that we never actually get there. So that's another side of it, is thinking of what are the various things that could wipe out the human race. And AI gone wrong, artificial intelligence misunderstood is certainly the most likely thing to wipe us out like 20, 30 years from now. If it occurs sooner, then it would be the, conventional things that you think about. So, nuclear war, pandemics, untreatable infectious disease. So, but probably those are not very likely. We've had pretty good success. There hasn't been a nuclear conflict for a long time, since the end of World War II. So. And the knowledge to make nuclear weapons is a little bit arcane and so on. Whereas you can think that in the artificial intelligence world, there's nothing that's that hard. You don't need specialized centrifuges to do AI. There's not a lot of there's no need for rare elements to do AI, specialized equipment, so it's much more accessible. So think of the Bill Joy idea of the democratization of evil, and the fact that the world won't need us at some point. That could happen. So by kind of thinking of a range of outcomes, kind of improves your enthusiasm for preventing the really worst ones, because they're like worse than your worst nightmare, really. So it's not only part of the purpose of this course to be able to understand kind of utopian future outcomes, but also the other side, apocalyptic ones. And if you want to, where did that idea come from? That's the purpose of the course. It comes from the first focus groups. So people like yourselves who sat around the table and conceptualized this course, and they said, Dr. Soles, tell us everything. Hold nothing back to the extent you can. Tell us everything. We don't want to be like coddled or like people to be protecting us from the truth. We want to know the truth. So that means knowing the full range of how bad the future could be, how good, and how we could incrementally move it in a positive direction. Other questions, comments? Yeah.
I'm really curious what you were talking about with the differences, say, between like, the liver and the kidney, where the structural organization is really key to how it functions.
Yeah.
I'm curious about possibly other examples in the human body where sort of like a integration of like higher level functioning with the nervous system becomes a hindrance and possibly impossibility for transplanting those kinds of organs. Like, for example, nervous control of like the heart or something like that.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case. Like there is a fairly detailed nervous system in the heart, the cardiac conduction system, but it is an integral part of the heart, and it generally gets transplanted along with it. Like the kidney is innervated. It has nerves, but they don't really do much. So when you cut a kidney out of one person, put it in somebody else, the nerves don't actually link up, but that doesn't seem to matter. They didn't have an important function. So I guess other examples,
Because like you mentioned the eyeball potentially being replaced with something that's more,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
more
so-
functional,
so-
and that's pretty heavily integrated with like with the occipital lobe or whatever.
Yeah.
How your brain works.
Yeah, and you could also imagine that maybe you can access these cameras much better than the eye without having to lose your current eye. Maybe it's not that bad to have 4 eyes too.
Right,
You can
yeah.
do biological eyes, and then whenever you want to, you can switch to
Yeah.
other. Yeah, so I think that might also be a feature. So some things you could probably only get that functionality by replacing a biological organ with one that's of some other type, but others you could probably have both. Yeah, and well, it's really creepy to think about, but in China, they basically transplanted everything, so, and there's a market for everything, and, executed prisoners are executed in a way that, facilitates the use of their organs and all this kind of thing. And so there are lots of transplantation done that we would say it's not that the person needed those organs to live. It's just, it's possible to basically transplant everything. You would have a feeling that if there is something like natural justice, that as the power of China increases in the world, that they'll clean up their act to some extent, It just seems like that would happen, that like there wouldn't be ethnic minorities that are, just killed for their organs and stuff the way there is now. Just because in the long term, like, okay, you say from a policy point of view, China did that because these radical religious groups were causing societal unrest, and they wanted to send a clear message, we're in charge here, and but I would say that message has been sent, and what they might want in the long run is for everybody in the country to normally act as if this was a good country, but actually to feel that, right? That, yeah, so probably they will end up cleaning up their act, and so organ replacement there would become more logical than it is now, less mean-spirited kind of. So, like, if you're accused of a crime and executed, your relatives have to pay for the bullet that actually kills you. They get a bill and they have to pay and stuff like that. I'm assuming that at some point would end. And similarly, you can imagine, while it's very difficult to predict the future, there are some specific things that you can kind of figure, well, that is very likely to happen. So that's what I feel. So I think Marcus Hutter is not absolutely unique in being able to describe something that everybody else just says beyond this point, it cannot be predicted, and therefore you can't say anything about it. So even things that cannot be predicted may have certain predictable characteristics. I know it sounds like a tautology, but I'm pretty sure that that's true. So maybe that's one other skill that you'll get in this course, to predict things that by definition cannot be predicted, but you can kind of, sort of predict them. Questions? So I realized what I did today, which is not such a bad thing, is I presented an older version of the slideshow. So what I sent to you is, updated beyond what I presented here. So it contains slides about the humorist who thought that humor should be part of science teaching. And so I don't think it's a crucial lack. I think I did teach you the main things that I wanted to. It's just I didn't teach you the most recent slide. It's the first time that ever happened. Right. So in a sense, you get more out of the slideshow because it represents a kind of evolution beyond this. Yeah, so just to talk about the future of this course now. Next week, it's entirely ethics, and then the week after, we have 3 AI lectures. And then you're probably expecting a boring conversation. Yeah, this was the other feature of you that I described. Always leaving early, yes, right, okay. Thank you, Paul. So we actually, I don't know about most of the rest of these schedules. So like most of the other lecturers have not actually confirmed their dates and that sort of thing. So I know it seems odd, but that's the reality. Some of it's for very good reasons. I mean, Rich Sutton is a very famous person not only in the world, but in Edmonton. I mean, there are these Edmonton Journal articles suggesting that AI is a whole new industry, right? I mean, equal to like oil and gas that's being created here at the university. It's very exciting. So all he said is he's good with presenting on a Tuesday or a Thursday. We just haven't figured out which particular Tuesday or Thursday. But similarly, Patrick Plarski, we haven't actually settled on a date. So everything will happen. It's just that we only really have absolute knowledge of the next 5 lectures of the course. nothing for certain after that. So, anyway, I just thought I would confess that reality to you. So we have 9 minutes. Anything else you want to talk about? So, Matthew James, what has it been like being here? Do you have?
Oh, this is very interesting. Hilariously, I remember giving a short presentation many years ago in junior high on reconstructing organs and the whole concept of like a tissue scaffold.
Yeah.
It seems like a very old concept, but it's only just now sort of becoming, I don't want to say mainstream, but more feasible technologically.
Right. No, it is old. I mean, in the sense that it was suggested a long time ago, and there are paintings of like white people with black feet and stuff like that that suggest that the idea has been out there for a very long time. It's just now becoming practical. Now, Joel Crichton was the improv guy, singer, songwriter, humorist, piano player, kind of. He took this course in the first term that was a regular university course, so that was in 2012, so 7 years ago. Yeah, it was quite interesting having him as a part of the class. That term, we only had 2 regular students. I didn't talk about that very much. People, they're really embarrassing to me. They'd have these 7 people sitting in the seats, but only 2 of them were actually registered taking the course. Others were my friends who were interested in the course and that sort of thing. And it worked great. They were good comments and everything. And luckily, there were 5 students taking it the next course, next term, because I thought, you know, it's nice to work for a university where you can teach a course with only 2 students and no one complains. But in the long run, everybody's going to be soul destroying. Like that term, one of the students I felt that I bought for $530 because I paid for an ad in the Metro that cost $530. She's on the train, he gives me a call. I thought, wow, there, buy him. But I thought, am I gonna have to pay $530 for every future student? That's sort of a bad deal, yeah. So things are looking up now, I don't have to do that anymore. Yes?
Just a general question for you or anyone. I've been a consumer of science fiction for 45 years or so, and I find it has led to a lot of my speculations or imaginings of what might be in the future, both utopian and dystopian. I'm wondering what you feel, or anyone, has been the role of science fiction in bringing these questions to the front of our consciousness, and depending on how you answer, are there any particular examples of writings or movies that you think are really valuable to get us thinking about future issues?
Yeah, so what I would say is Jonathan White's early lectures. I mean, it's very interesting. If you think of the Gartner hype curve, he's been in all those various points. And so he has presented lectures in this course when he was feeling very negative about the whole idea of, the singularity, everybody talking about it, has a book that they're pushing, and they're all acting out of self-interest, and they say this is for everybody, but it's really just for white males in Silicon Valley and all this kind of thing. And they say that rising tide raises all boats, that actually think of all the boats that will raise and so on. So he certainly got into this field because of science fiction, and like the first 10 or 12 of his slides are about various science fiction authors and so on. Follow him on Facebook, he talks about science fiction a lot. I tend to be reactive to, like, if there's science fiction that I really need to know about because most other people are talking about it, I read that. So I'm more of a science fiction politician, I guess, from that point of view. But Jonathan White is a bona fide science fiction fan, and that's how he got into this field. No, I think science fiction has an important role, and it should not be regulated, but maybe the financial success of the authors, I mean, if they're really badly misleading everybody, maybe those books shouldn't sell as well. I don't know, who knows? It's another kind of, morality, right? There's so many moral questions that we know are important. Maybe that's one of the ones that we're not sure is actually important.
We don't know who the misleaders are until a couple hundred years from now.
Yes, that's right. We won't have the list. Yes?
Well, there's typically always I guess science fiction could serve as a framework, but then again it is just theory, and theory sees a relatively long delay between implementation and, general ideas.
Yeah?
So I guess it couldn't work to inspire people. I mean, I know it has inspired dozens, but a few more than that. A lot of people, but it is fiction at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it might not necessarily be possible with current technologies or even in the future, but
Right.
I'm not sure where I'm going with this now.
So let's talk about Oroville, which is a utopian community in India, where I've been, and then Star Trek, which is a utopian community of the future on TV. So, like in our shared room, you know, where the students that I'm training and I, where we have our office, there's a lot of stuff about Star Trek. And many of the students have never watched a single Star Trek thing, and you know, it's just not. But going to Oroville was really interesting. It's a utopian community that doesn't use money, and you know, a lot of kind of futuristic things. And I talked to a lot of the people living there. I went to the kind of meditation center, this big golden globe that you can go inside and this experience and so on. But shortly after I came back from there was a brutal murder. So obviously they haven't solved everything, and to some extent their commerce doesn't work very well if they don't use money at all. So they like use money a little bit, but not in the usual way, you know. So I kind of philosophical about both those things. It's not important that I learn everything about Oroville because it's nice to know it's there, but it's not an ideal community. And similarly, it's okay if a student comes to work with me and never learns anything about Star Trek. That's okay. They can learn a little bit from the signs that we have and stuff about Star Trek, but it's not mandatory. It's not necessary. Maybe when we're conceptualizing things, it'd be better to have a student who doesn't know about Star Trek, but knows about some other like fictional world that I don't know anything about. And yeah, so anyway, that's sort of the way I think about it. Okay, well, thank you all. And so, yeah, if you want to